Hey guys, and welcome back to another Hack the Box walkthrough video. Today we're going to be tackling the box vaccine, which is in the tier 2 list of machines in the starting point track. But before we actually do any of that, there's two quick things that I want to clear up. The first thing is that I got convinced to post some of my content up on TikTok. So I'm going to go ahead and toss my TikTok information up on the screen over here. It's basically going to be the same exact username, but just real short, bite-sized videos of a lot of the stuff that's already on over here, some other explanation style stuff of cybersecurity content, just general stuff that I already post, just condensed down into a little bit shorter form. So that'll be up there. I'll have the link and the username for that. The other thing is, back again by popular demand, I am going to be posting the actual solutions as we walk through for the answers in the web page that it asks you for, but that'll be at the end of the video. So if you want to check out the answers, just verify that you're doing everything okay with me. Stick around to the end of the video. If you get stuck, feel free to drop any questions, comments, concerns in the chat below, and hopefully people that are solving this along with me, in addition to myself, can try to help each other out and work through some stuff together. But with that all out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into the video. So the first thing that we're always going to want to do really is just make a directory for the box with the makedir command. And all we need to do is the makedir, we'll call this vaccine, and then you can use the and operator, which will concatenate the following command after your first one if the first one succeeds. So we're going to make the directory, and then we will cd into it so that we are all there. So now we can hit enter, and we made the directory, and you can see our working directory changed to our vaccine directory that we're going to use to store everything. So cool, that's up. Now what we want to do is we want to port scan the target. So we're going to start with sudo, which means that we're going to scan with some privileged access, which you kind of always need to do for a lot of different scan types with Nmap. So it's kind of just, I just always include it. Then we're just going to do dash lowercase s, capital S for a stealth scan or a SYN scan. I highly recommend you go check out HackTheBox Academy Enumeration with Nmap module if you want more detailed information about why exactly these are considered like stealth scans, things like that. But I'll let you guys know what these do and why I'm including them as I go. So that is our first flag. Our next flag is going to be dash lowercase s capital V capital C, and that is basically just the concatenation of dash lowercase s capital V, which is the version scanning. So it's going to try to get banners from services as you scan, try to get the version of the service, and then SC is the standard default scripts. So that's not going to run all the scripts against the service when it sees it, but it's just going to run a subset of scripts. Say it finds an SSH port, it's only going to run a couple of SSH scripts against that service just to try to get some further information. So we're crunching those together. That's dash lowercase s capital V and then dash lowercase s capital C. Smash it together. You can concatenate it all just like that. And that is going to give us some extra information from the target that we are trying to enumerate here. Next thing that we're going to do is dash capital P lowercase n, and that is actually going to prevent the host discovery phase. So we're only scanning one target in this case, and we don't necessarily need to know that it's alive on the network because we know it's alive, we know it's there. We don't need to go ahead and discover it on the network. So that's what dash capital P lowercase n does. Then we're going to do dash T4 or dash capital T4, which the dash capital T is basically just a template that you can use for speeds of scanning. So dash T4 is what I believe is considered aggressive, but it goes up to 5. 5, I found that it's so fast that sometimes it has a lot of false positives reported. T4 kind of seems like the happy medium for speed and accuracy for me. So we're going to go ahead and include that. I also like to include dash dash open. So that's going to only report back open ports. And that is important because all we really care about are the open ports, the things that we can actually interact with from the outside. So we'll do dash dash open. Then I like to include dash VV just to get some more verbose output. So you'll see that there. Then what we want to do is we want to basically just paste in our target IP address. So that is up, and then we're going to do dash lowercase o capital A, and that is going to specify our output formats. So I just do A because it'll give us all the outputs. So that's like the greppable format, the regular human readable format, and then XML. So what we'll do, we just need to name the output file here. So we can just do, let's just call this full TCP scan. And now this scan's ready to kick off, so I'm going to go ahead and run it and then resume the video once it's done running. And now our scan is all done. So let's go ahead and jump up to the top here. And I'm going to save us some time just by skipping some of the rabbit holes that are on this machine. But a couple things let's go through and check out. So the first port is port 21, and that is running FTP. And then if we look through our enumeration that we got here, it looks like down here you'll see this FTP and non-script ran, and then we have anonymous login allowed. And now that is particularly important because that means we can go ahead and check out and see what is inside of the folder. You'll actually see that the FTP and non-script goes ahead and does a directory listing and tells you immediately before you even get there. So we know that there's a backup.zip file in that FTP directory that we apparently have read, write, execute access over, so we can pull that down off the server. And that's really important because backup files, backup zip files typically have a lot of juicy stuff like usernames, passwords, credentials, all great stuff that we can toy around with there. So definitely going to go ahead and check that out. Let's also just make a quick mental note before we go ahead and dig into that backup folder. We have SSH open. That's good. That can be a potential privilege escalation point, so on and so forth. Not really an initial attack vector. So we'll make mental note of that. And then thirdly, we have port 80 open, which is going to be this HTTP web server. So we can kind of see what the title of it is. It looks like there's this, it's a corporation, megacorp. It's a login page, which is also super interesting. We'll definitely be sure to check that out. It looks like we have Apache running. We know that this is an Ubuntu machine, so we're going up against a Linux box here. Definitely we'll make note of the Apache version just so that we can check and see if there's any vulnerabilities associated with that version number, so on and so forth. But in terms of priority list, first thing we want to go ahead and check out is FTP. So to do that, all we need to do is we're just going to do FTP and then copy and paste in our IP address. And it said that the anonymous user is allowed to log in. So we'll just go ahead and type in anonymous and then blank for the password. And it looks like we have a successful login. So now all we need to do is we can just do ls to list the directory. There it is. There's that backup.zip file. So now we can use the git command in the FTP prompt to grab that backup.zip file. So we'll just do backup.zip and we'll do that, and it looks like we transferred it successfully. So now all we need to do is hit exit and we are back in our local directory. If we do ls, we should see the backup.zip file right here, which we do. So now that we have that, we want to try to get the contents out of the zip file, and to do that all we need is the unzip command, or typically this is how you would do it. So we'll just try to unzip that file really quick. We'll do unzip, and it looks like it is password protected. So you can try a couple of different basic passwords like password, maybe password 123. Okay, password with an exclamation point. And it looks like it is just not going to be the case that we are going to guess the password. So one thing that we can do instead of guessing the password here is use John the Ripper. And John the Ripper is basically going to crack the password hash that's associated with this, and we will then be able to open up the zipped backup folder. with all that in mind, we can start to set up John the Ripper so that we can get the hash and open up this folder. So what we need to start out by doing is using this utility that John the Ripper comes installed with. And now if you're using a Parrot OS pwn box from HackTheBox or just Parrot OS or Kali Linux, this should all be pre-installed. You shouldn't have to worry about it. If you do need to install it, it's just sudo apt install John, and it gets everything set up for you. But the module that we're going to use is called zip to John. So it takes a zip folder and it formats it such that John the Ripper can actually crack the hash of it. So what we need to do is we need to do zip, we just need zip to John. We'll just do zip to John, the name of our zip file, so that's backup.zip, and then redirect that into a new file. We'll just call this hashes, I guess, or hash. So you'll see that it went ahead and created the directory for us. Then we can ensure that it's there. You see that it is there. I'm going to go ahead and clear this out for us. And then if we just do cat on the hash file, what we should be able to see here is the hash that it formatted, and we're just going to do this just to make sure that it formatted it for us correctly. So we go ahead and cat that out. You can see it's the file name, and then it looks like it was done with this pkzip format, and it tells us everything that was in it, and it looks like it formatted everything for us correctly, so we can go ahead and move on. Now to actually run John is super simple. All we need to do is type in John, and if I can type correctly, so we'll do John, and then we just need to supply a word list, and we'll do that as user share word lists, and then you should have rocku here. And rocku is basically just a compiled list of a bunch of leaked credentials from a while ago, but a lot of them are still commonly used, but it's a really exhaustive list, so a lot of the times it's great to run hashes against. Then we just need to supply our hash file, and this can take a second. I'm not sure if it will, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut the video over to once this is done running. Okay, so it looks like this was done running, so now we should just be able to do John -- show and then hash, and if we do that, it should print us the actual password here. You can see it. This is the password. This is just another way to show the actual password that was associated with it. So if you were running this against a bunch of lists of hashes, this is one way that you can retrieve it. So you go ahead and do this, and then you can see the way that it actually tells you the name of the password, just so you know where to look in the future, is the file name, and then the second set of inside of those colons there is the actual password. So now what we should be able to do is we can use that unzip on that backup folder, and we will get the contents out. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this down really quick. So we'll just go ahead and copy that. And now we should be able to do unzip on backup.zip, and we can just hit enter. And now when it's prompting us for the password, we just have to paste that in and hit enter, and you can see it actually completed, and we have both the index page and the style.css file. And now I'm going to actually go ahead and clear the terminal because I want to show you guys something. So typically when you recover a file like this with PHP, a lot of the times you'll find static credentials. And that's the case anytime you find source code files. You want to search them for secrets that might have been hard-coded. So the CSS file is really just it's really just how HTML or PHP pages get stylized and made look pretty. So it doesn't really have any sensitive information. The index.php, however, is the home page file, and that might be interesting. So if we cat out index.php, we'll see that there's a lot of information. So one thing that I typically like to do is we'll get rid of this, and we can do the same thing, but we'll pipe it to grep, and we'll just grep for maybe user and see what we have. Okay, yeah, so there you go. So we have a username and password. So you can see we'll have this username as admin and the MD5 hash of a password here. So one thing that we definitely want to do really quick while we have that pulled up is echo those into a file somewhere within our local machine. That way we have everything here. So we'll just go ahead and do this. And I typically like to do like username, password separated by a colon. So I'll just do admin, and then we'll grab this hash right here. So we'll just paste that in, and we'll call this creds. So now if we clear this and cat out creds, we should have our username and password hash, MD5 password hash specifically, that we just recovered from the index.php source code file. So with those credentials recovered, basically all we need to do then is grab our password hash, which we did see was MD5, and put it into a new file by itself. Just isolate it and prep it to send it over to another password cracking tool called Hashcat. So we'll just quickly isolate that in a new file. We'll just echo it into a new file. We'll just call it admin hash, and then get rid of that. That way, if we just cat admin hash, we have our password hash that way. So then what we need to do is we need to run this new tool called Hashcat. And Hashcat is operated slightly differently. It basically uses an attack type and then a mode. So the attack type that we want is basically based off of the type of hash. So MD5 is default, and that's 0. Then it's going to operate in a mode, and we want to run it our hash against a word list. We're going to use RockU again. So to use just a word list, that is mode 0 as well. So you have -A0, -M0. And then you supply the name of your file, hash file, which in our case is admin hash, and then the path to the word list. So we're going to use user share word lists, and then RockU. And once again, this might take a few seconds to run, depending on the speed of your computer. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this over to when it's done running, and we'll get back to you guys with the password hash. Okay, so as you can see, it didn't take too terribly long, and if you look at about the middle here, you can see the status is cracked, and this isolated line here, you see our password hash, and then a colon, and then the cracked password. So it's query789. And now we know that based off of the fact that we got those credentials from the index.php page, and we did see from our Nmap script that there was a login page for that megacorp business on their web server. We know that these are now credentials, most likely for their login page on that web server. So what we can do then is we'll just get rid of this, and then we will launch a web browser here. Cool. We will navigate over to the website. So we just need HTTP, the IP address, and then HTTP by default operates over port 80, so we don't need to specify anything special. And now we see this login page, and we know now that the login is QWERTY789, and if we log in, we should have access now to the login page. So super cool. Okay, so now that we have the access to this website, I'll save us a little bit of clicking around because the explanation for the actual attack path is going to take a second. So if you ever identify a input field, such as this search bar up at the top on a website, you always want to go ahead and try different injection style attacks. And now, of the injection style web attacks, SQL injection always comes to mind as a top candidate when it comes to these compromise style challenges. Now, SQL injection is one of the few or handful injections that you can actually perform that can result in remote code execution directly on the underlying machine. So if you ever see this search field, or just a search field, input field in general, that's something that you want to look for. So now, to explain the actual SQL injection that's going to happen, I'm just going to send in a string here in the in the search field called test, and you can see that the actual get parameter is named search up top here, and we see that test was passed through. So instead of going through here and manually trying to plug away at a SQL injection on a box like this where we just want to get to the end goal as quickly as possible and not necessarily sit there and plug away at every single iteration of a SQL injection, you can use an automated tool called sqlmap. And I will show you guys how to use that now. So we'll go ahead and get rid of that, and we'll pull back up our command line interface here, and then we are just going to type sqlmap, and then the first flag that we're going to want is -u, and now -u is how we specify the URL. So we'll put the URL in the strings here, but we just want to do HTTP and then paste in the IP address, and it was dashboard is the page, so we'll do dashboard.php, just making sure I don't have any spelling errors as I go here. And then the parameter name was search after the question mark there, and then we can supply any value here. I'm going to go ahead and put test again to show you guys that it doesn't mean anything. And now the problem with running this just as is like this is that our session to that dashboard.php page is authenticated. We can't just browse directly to the dashboard.php page because it's protected behind a set of credentials. And now the browser needs to know some way to understand that we are authenticated, and typically that's done with a cookie. So if we go back over to our browser, we can check out and see in our storage with Control-Shift-I, and then you can just come over to this little storage tab, and then under the cookies tab, you'll see that we do have a cookie set. And that cookie is basically saying, hey, this is a valid session for the username and password on this website. And now you'll see the name of the cookie is this PHP sesh ID and the value. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that value, and then we can come back over to the command line interface and set this up even further. So now we need to tell sqlmap to use this cookie such that it's able to authenticate and use our active session and test that parameter, because otherwise it would just get access denied. So we'll do cookie equals, we need to send in the actual name of the cookie, so that was PHP sesh ID, which is the standard name for a PHP session ID on any PHP website, and then we just need to paste in the cookie value. So I cut off a little bit there, but I promise it's nothing different. It's literally just the value of the cookie after PHP session ID. I would also like to point out it's a good practice to use single quotes here instead of double quotes, because sometimes depending on the shell that you're running, the command language interpreter might interpret the equal sign right here after this PHP session ID as like a weird form of line break. You never know. You can get away with it on most modern systems, but I just like to keep it with the single quotes for string literals. That way we don't run into problems like that. So we'll go ahead and run this here, and you'll see that it's going to prompt you with a couple yes, no's. All you can do is basically just hit enter so that it runs all the default tests. And basically, I'm going to skip over to once this is done, but you will see at the very bottom, it's going to say that the search parameter appears to be injectable, which is in fact what we see right here. This get parameter search is vulnerable. So knowing that, sqlmap actually has a really nifty built-in flag for us, and it basically will allow us to get a operating system shell directly through the tool itself. So to get that operating system shell, all we need to do is utilize the built-in OS shell command that comes with sqlmap. So we'll just do --os-shell and we'll hit enter. It's going to prompt us to answer a couple questions here. If it does, mine didn't. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but that's no big deal. Just go ahead and basically hit enter through all the defaults. Oh, and Siri was listening to me. So if it does, just go ahead and prompt all those, or hit enter to enter through all the prompts there. You'll see we have this OS shell. Now this is actually very it's unstable. It can break very easily. So what we want to do is try to upgrade our shell to a reverse shell. But we're going to use this OS shell to do a little bit of remote code execution to get that reverse shell. So the first thing that we need to do is I'm going to open up a new tab on the command line interface here, and we're just going to do ifconfig, and we're going to look for the ton0 interface, which is this one. That is the networking interface of HackTheBox. So we'll go ahead and grab our IP address on that network interface. We'll come back over and we're going to save that for our reverse shell. But before we even do our reverse shell, what we want to do is start a netcat listener. So to do that, we're just going to do sudo netcat -l, and that is for listening mode, V for verbose output, N for no DNS name resolution, because the payload is coming from the remote host to us, and we don't have a domain name for this IP address on this interface. So if it tried to do any name resolution, it would fail, so we want to do -n there. -p for the port, and then we're going to send this over 443 because it's a little bit more stealthy that way. And the reason it's more stealthy that way is, like I said, the payload or the reverse shell is coming out from the remote host to our machine. And if you were to think about why that's logical, 443 is HTTPS traffic. So it's very common for HTTPS traffic to be leaving the network. So if we can sneak our shell in over 443, it won't send an alert like it would if traffic was randomly outgoing on port 444. So always good to do little tidbits like that. So we'll go ahead and start our netcat listener there. And then we're going to come back over to our OS shell here on sqlmap and build out our reverse shell. So what we'll do is we're going to do bash, and then we're going to do -c, and that means we're going to execute an inline bash command here. So everything inside of these quotation marks is going to be executed as a bash command. Then we're going to do bash -i, so that's going to send an interactive bash session. That's what the -i implies. And then we're going to do a little bit of redirector magic here with the caret and the and sign, and then we're going to use this dev TCP. It's like a pseudo networking device that's included on Linux, and then we just need to paste in our IP address because we want, this is once again being executed on the remote host, and then we want it to reach out to us. So we're going to include our IP address there, and then / and then the port. And then we're going to do one more little set of redirection magic to make sure that we're receiving standard input and output on our device, and that's just going to be 0, another caret, and then the and sign, and 1. And then we can go ahead and close off that quotation mark there over at the end, so that all of this good stuff right inside of here is sent as an inline bash command that's being executed on the operating system via this OS shell. This bash interactive session is going to, or this dev TCP device is basically going to send us a bash interactive session. So that's the shell that we're going to be getting back to our IP address on port 443, which we have a listener for set up right here. So now if we go ahead, come back over to this tab, and we run that, we will hit yes, and then we'll come over here, and we can see that we caught the reverse shell. And now that we have the reverse shell, we can go ahead and do a couple of things. So even this still is not as stable as we would want it. So our goal is always to get the most stable SSH-like session possible. And now there's a couple of ways that we can do this. Python is basically a standard install on most Linux operating systems now. So we can do one thing, which is the which command to see if Python is on this machine. So we'll do which python 3 because because that is more common than the deprecated Python 2.7 at this point. So we'll run which Python 3, and then if you do get this output here that shows it's in the user bin file, that means that we do have it. So if you get a path there, that means it exists on the system. So what we can then do is leverage Python 3 to basically get a more interactive session here. So just like how we did that bash-c, you can use Python-c in the same exact way to execute inline Python, and we're going to upgrade our shell even further with Python here. So then we just need to type Python 3 -c, and then we're going to do, in single quotation marks, we're going to do import pty semicolon. So that's a module pty, and then we're going to do pty.spawn. So we're basically calling a function from that pty library. So we'll do pty.spawn, and then we're going to do /bin/bash, and then we are going to close those quotation off once again. And sorry that cut off there. Then all we need to do here is we can just close off our parentheses on that function, and then basically just end it with a single quotation mark, and we will see that Python is going to execute everything inside those single quotation marks. So it's importing the pty library, and then it's using pty.spawn, so the spawn method from the pty library, to spawn a new bash session for us. So we'll do that, and we'll hit enter, and now we have a slightly more upgraded terminal. And then I was just doing a little bit of digging around the machine just to see where everything was located at here. But what we do want to do is go to var lib PostgreSQL in terms of the working directory. And then if we just ls, you'll see that we have the user.txt file, which we should just be able to cat out per usual. Whoops. And that is flag number 1 on the system. Okay, so now we need to focus on escalating our privileges. And basically the first thing that we always want to try to do, or that we would try to do, is use sudo-l. And basically what that would do would be to list out all the commands that we can run as the super user or root on the machine, but you actually need to know the password for the user, and we don't actually know the password for the Postgres user that we are logged in as here, so we can't do that. But what we want to do is we should go and try to check out that the var www HTML folder where all of the source code for the website is hidden. Because when we found in that backup.zip file, we got the index.php page, which had some hard-coded credentials in it. If we go back in there and try to find the source code for the rest of the page, it's typically not an anomaly when you find hard-coded credentials. They're going to exist elsewhere. So what we can do is we can cd to var www and see what we have there, and it's just the HTML folder. So it looks like we have an image, we have the JavaScript that's running the dashboard, the actual dashboard page, PHP page there. We have some license, CSS pages, and then the index page that we already read. So really the only source code file here are these dashboard files, the JavaScript and PHP pages that would be of interest to us. So let's go ahead and start with the PHP page, since the last one was of interest to us. So we'll just pipe that output and check for password. And it looks like we do. So this is what appears to be the username and password for a database connection. So we have the DB name. It looks like that's the actual database name. This is the Postgres user that we're logged in as now. And then it also looks like we have a password. And this is all good because that means that we could probably log in with this user through SSH instead of having to rely on this reverse shell because it will randomly die just like it did there. So let's go ahead and copy that down now. So what we'll do is we will just make sure we have this. We'll just do db creds, or let's call it SSH creds. SSH creds. We're going to echo this password into that file. Okay, so we will do that. And now basically all we need to do is we can do SSH, and then we'll do Postgres just like it says there, and then we'll do at the IP address of the target, and we'll paste that in, and then let's just pre-copy our password here when it inevitably asks us for it. So we'll go ahead, enter there, just say yes to the fingerprint, and then paste in the password, and now we are logged in as the Postgres user over an SSH connection. So we have a much more stable connection, and we can start to try to laterally or vertically escalate our privileges here. And like I previously just mentioned, to check our sudo privileges, we needed the password. And we didn't have that a minute ago, but now we do. So we can go ahead and check our privileges this time. So we'll just type that by sudo-l and then paste the password in, and then we will get a list of all of the binaries that we are able to execute as the super user. What we can see from the output here is that we are able to use the VI editor to edit this file in particular with root privileges. So what we can do is we're going to hop back over to Firefox actually, and we're going to go to a site called GTFO bins. And what that is it is basically a repository of all the binaries that come by default on Linux and how you can abuse them to escalate your privileges. So we saw that we had VI, so all we need to do is type in VI into the search bar, and then we can look here and see all of the different ways that we can use that to escalate our privileges. So it looks like this is going to be the way that we want to do it, because we can't run inline VI. We have to open up a file. So as you saw before, there's that -C to run everything inline, but we can't do that. So we're going to have to open up VI just like we will on that file, and then we are going to have to put a couple commands in here. So now that we know what that is going to look like, let's hop back over into the terminal and actually get that done. So what we want to do is basically take all of this, because we're going to execute that as the sudo user. Then we just need to execute this as the sudo user, and we are allowed to here. And now in VI, to enter into command mode, you're going to type a colon. And then the first thing that we need to do is to do set shell equal to bin sh. And then the second thing that we are going to do is do that colon again, you'll see at the bottom, and then we're going to do shell. And then boom, you can see we now are root indicated by our little pound sign instead of the $sign. So if we go ahead and type who am I, we can see we are the root user on the machine, and then if we cd to root and ls, we can cat out the root.txt flag. And there it is. So we had successfully escalated our privileges on the vaccine machine and completely owned this machine. So stick around for a couple more, and we will go through and review everything that we did and walk through some of those answers that they are prompting us for in the web interface. So let's go ahead and start walking through some of these answers and review what we did. So it says, besides SSH and HTTP, what other service is located on, or hosted on this box rather, and that was FTP. And that is what we basically logged in as the anonymous user to grab that backup folder. And two, Task 2 says this service can be configured to allow login with any password for a specific username. Like I just said, that was the anonymous user. We saw that with the FTP anon script. So we will enter that in. And then it says, what is the name of the file downloaded over this service for task 3? That was backup.zip. And that is the file that we grabbed with the git command off of the FTP server. Moving on to task 4, what script comes with John the Ripper? Basically to generate a hash for the zip archive. And if you remember right, that was zip to John. And we can submit that answer. Cool. So task number 5, what is the password for the admin on the website? That was QWERTY789, and that was the hash that we cracked from the zip archive. Or actually, it was the hash that we cracked from the file inside of the zip archive. So we can go ahead and submit that. Now moving on to task number 6, if we look at the question, it's basically just asking what option can be passed to sqlmap to get a command execution shell. That was the dash os shell flag that I showed you guys. So os shell, and we can submit the answer. Boom. And now moving on to task 7, it says what program can the Postgres user run as root using sudo? And that is VI. That's the text editor that we showed you, that we investigated over on GTFO bins, and that is the answer to task 7. Moving on to task 8, we need to submit the user flag, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Boom, there we go. And then we will submit the root flag, and I will go ahead and grab that. And then we just need to paste that in, and we can go ahead and submit that. And then we have successfully finished off the machine. So thanks for sticking around for the duration of the video, and I will catch you guys in the next one.